Hi everyone, my name is Doug and welcome to the Accidental Expat Life. What was supposed to be a one-year adventure teaching English in Korea somehow turned into more than 26 years of living and working overseas. Before that, I was working in the golf industry in Canada with the goal of becoming a golf professional. But after being laid off one winter in Vancouver, a Korean friend suggested I come over and explore Korea for a couple of months. But after seeing how expensive it was, I almost gave up the idea until I came across an advertisement to teach English. At the time, I thought, well, maybe I'd teach English for a year, experience a different culture, and then head back home and continue my golf career. That one decision completely changed my life. Over the past 26 years, I've ended up living and teaching in Korea, Thailand, Egypt, and Brazil. I've worked in language schools, international schools. I've met some incredible people. I've experienced amazing opportunities and gone through some very difficult moments along the way. So on this channel, I wanted to share my honest stories and lessons of more than 2 decades overseas. The good, the bad, the culture shock, the schools, the travel, the friendships I created, and the reality of building a life abroad. I also hope these videos will help people who are thinking about teaching overseas, moving abroad, changing careers later in life, or simply wondering what long-term expat life is really like beyond the Instagram version of it. So in today's first video, I want to talk about how it all started. So now it's October of 2000, and I've just completed my 3rd year as an assistant golf professional. And the course that I'm working at, even though you can golf year-round in Vancouver, they don't need as many people working during the winter months. So me being one of the newer employees, I was unfortunately being laid off until I was able to come back, I think in March or April of the following year. So I was at a point where I didn't know exactly what I was going to do for the next, 5 months until I was able to come back. So I bumped into a friend of mine who was a member at another golf course that I worked at, a Korean gentleman, and told him my situation, and he suggested that why don't I just go to Korea for a few months just to check it out, travel around and see what it's like. So I thought that was a pretty good idea. So I did some more research on it, and I found that at the time it was a little bit expensive. The flight over was expensive. Accommodation and hotels especially was expensive. Food wasn't that bad, but it was the 2 main things that were going to take a lot of money. So I kind of was having second thoughts. And I just happened to come across, I don't remember where it was, an ad on teaching English in Korea. And at the time, you really didn't need what you need now. I believe you need I think it's called TOEFL or a TESOL, teaching English as a second language. At the time, you just needed to have a university degree, which of course I had. So I decided to take a look into it. I spoke to a gentleman. He gave me all the information, told me how interesting it was and the money you could make, and it sounded very interesting. So I decided to take a year off from the golf industry, because you're allowed 7 years to complete the entire program for when you become a head professional. So I instructed them that I was going to be taking a year off and travel, and then I would be coming back and resume what I was doing. So I decided to look into this with this guy. He gave me a lot of information on it, and it sounded very interesting. So that was going to be my next move. I was going to go to Korea to teach English. So now I've packed up everything. I've got my 1 suitcase, and of course I'm taking my golf clubs with me because I know that Korea has a tremendous excitement for golf. They're very enthusiastic about it, so I knew that this would be a good idea for me to take my clubs with me. I'm taking the flight about 8-9 hours to Gimpo Airport, which Incheon, the newest airport, hadn't opened yet. So I was picked up by a representative from the school, and he took me for something to eat, and then we went to the apartment. Now, I was actually one of the first teachers there. The school hadn't started yet. So I was one of the first teachers there. And it was a small school, and I think total, not including the Korean teachers, there was only going to be 4 of us. So I was the first one there. The apartment was not bad. I think it had 4 bedrooms, and it was in this little town called Namyangju. Now, this was another bit of a confusing part because the guy that I spoke to when I got the job was telling me that the school was in Seoul. But when I arrived, this place is in the north of Seoul, and it's actually takes a little bit to get into. You've got to take a bus to get to the subway station, then you take the subway station into town. So this little town was a little ways out, but it wasn't bad. It had a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars and stuff, and especially it had a driving range, so I was quite happy with that. So we get to the apartment, like I said, it's 4-bedroom, and I was the only one there. There was another teacher going to be coming, I think, within the next day or 2. So I was out just exploring the town by myself and went to the driving range to practice, and that was it until this new guy came, and I think he was from Australia. So the two of us got along quite well. He was a little bit younger than me, obviously, and we had a couple of interesting excursions. We went into Seoul on Christmas Eve, and it was really snowing, and I believe we both had just a little bit too much to drink. He ended up passing out. So by the time we got back after the subway ride, we needed to take a taxi because at that time it was late, it was after midnight, the buses were not running anymore, so we had to take a taxi. And only just arriving a few weeks ago and never really being outside of the town, I was extremely lucky on finding my way back to our apartment. So I guess you could say that was our first excursion because obviously not speaking Korean and the taxi driver didn't really speak English. So it was a miracle that we ended up making it back. So now a few days later, 2 more teachers arrived, 2 girls from New Zealand. And the weird thing about it, as I said, it was a 4-bedroom apartment. At that time, it was okay. So each of us had our own room and everything was all right. And school had started and everything was going quite well. It was a little, what they call a Hagwon, a language school. And it was mainly teaching students up to the age of 13 or 14, I believe. So it was small classes, but it was very, very interesting. The kids were really cute, really nice. Again, some of them maybe could speak a little bit of English, but for the most part it was all Korean. So it was definitely a learning experience, and it was one that I'll never forget. People were so nice, so friendly. You know, they didn't give you shit for not being able to speak Korean, and and they apologized for not being able to speak English, which of course I told them is not their fault because I'm in their country and I've got to learn how to speak their language. So it was an interesting school in the fact that the Korean teachers there were very nice, the students and the parents were nice, but as time went on, the owner was a little bit strange, if I can use that word. And one incident that happened to me, I woke up one morning and I was really, really sick, like sore throat, headache, upset stomach. I don't think it was something I ate, I just think I was sick. So I had told the teachers who were going in to tell them that I wasn't going to be coming in today because I couldn't even get out of bed. So I'm lying there half asleep, and all of a sudden the doorbell rings. So I go and answer the door, and it's the owner. And he's asking how I'm doing, and I told him that I'm not doing great. I don't think I can make it to school today, and I'll be better, and I should be back tomorrow. So he starts literally dragging me to go to the school. he says, I can't stay home. I need to come into work. And I told him that it was just impossible. I could barely even stand for more than 30 seconds. And he just kept insisting that I come to school. And we got into a big argument for the fact that I told him I'm not coming in. And that was it. I'll stay at home, I'll get better, and I will be in the following day. So finally, he decided to leave. And I went back to lie down, and about 2 hours later, the doorbell rings again, and it's him again. And he's on my back again saying that I've got to come into school. So it was at that point that I thought, I'm not sure how much longer I can last at this place if this is what the situation is like when someone is ill, that they insist that you come into school when you are not feeling well. So I've got that in the back of my mind, and again, the day ended where I didn't go in. I came in the next day, but things just weren't the same after that incident. So it's now about 4 or so months in, and the school, as I said, was quite good. It was a small school right in the middle of the little town. So we went on different field trips and saw different things with the kids, and it was really interesting to learn about the Korean culture and things. So I was really enjoying that part of it. That episode that I had with the owner kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, but it was actually quite interesting place to work. So at this point, the male teacher who had moved in not long after me had quit. He went back to Australia. So now we're down to 3 teachers, and the owner decided to bring in another teacher, a Korean teacher. She turned out to be his niece, and she was able to speak English quite well and Korean, so she replaced the guy that had left. So now again, there's 4 of us in a 4-bedroom apartment, which was all right. So, but me and 3 girls, it was a little bit interesting in that way, but it turned out to be all right until one night her and her uncle got into a huge fight, and he actually hit her, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So she was quite upset. She was threatening to quit, and I was kind of there for moral support for her and trying to smooth things over with her and her uncle, and again, telling him that that's no way to treat his niece, regardless of what the argument is about. So him and I again got into a little bit of an argument because he didn't think that it was appropriate for me to stick my nose into where it didn't belong, and maybe he was right, but I didn't feel that it was appropriate for what he did to her, and I thought that if this was going to continue, that I wasn't going to be there much longer either. So we kind of smoothed it over, but again, we just had a very rocky relationship, and it kind of wasn't the greatest for the final few months that I was there. So, as I said, my time is running down, and I'm trying to think of what I'm going to be doing. I was anticipating coming back to Canada, so I'm starting to figure that out. And I was out one night at the driving range, and I'm hitting balls, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that there's a guy just standing there watching me. And I know for a fact he was not watching me because I'm such a great player. He was just standing there, and he was hitting balls, and then he came over and just stood there. So when I took a break, he came over and introduced himself. And we started talking. He asked what I was doing here, and I told him that I was teaching English. And he said that, oh, how interesting, because he owned his own language school a little bit closer into Seoul. It was an area called Nowon. And he asked what my plans were when my contract expired at this school. And I told him, well, in all likelihood, I'm probably going to head back to Canada because I was only planning to be in Korea for a year. So again, we kept talking, and he was saying his school was fairly new. It was maybe a half a year old. So he was telling me that he was interested in having me come to work there. So we discussed some things with regards to salary and working conditions and hours and what the job entailed. And it sounded actually quite interesting. So after a lot of thinking, I decided, well, maybe I'll take another year off from the golf industry and I will start at this job. And I went there to see what it was like first and had a look around. And it was really a neat area. It was, like I say, closer to Seoul, so it was a lot bigger area. It was a lot of it was easier to get into town with regards to the subway system. So I thought this might be a fairly good experience. So I decided to take him up on it and signed a contract with him to be there for a year. And I started there after my contract ended at my first school.